Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. This Sunday, Grace Potter rocks the stage at the Frederick Fairgrounds in Frederick, Maryland. I caught up with Potter to discuss her career and what it means to be a mother this Mother's Day.
I'm so happy to be here. This is so cool.
Now, so you played the Frederick Fairgrounds, I guess it was, like last fall or the first time they did this drive-in. So you kind of know what to expect. So tell me, first of all, like how cool of an experience is it that drive-ins are even a thing, A, and B, that it's allowing live music to continue in this crazy time?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was fun because I got to kind of be the guinea pig, and being that it was the first round of it, nobody knew what to expect, but I was just delighted by the entire experience. It was one of my favorite drive-in experiences yet on this whole COVID journey. But also, it brings back this whole like Americana vibe that I've always been attracted to drive-ins. I've always been kind of obsessed with like those old cool signs from like the Starlight Theater, whatever.
Right.
And you find us all kind of returning to form in some ways and getting back into our cars and becoming more of a culture of folks that, hang out in their cars. And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, everything's old. Everything old is new again. This thing that everyone thought was, a dinosaur that was dead is suddenly like the rage. They're popping up everywhere.
The coolest thing ever.
Yeah,
exactly.
You mentioned that is one of your favorite of the drive-ins you've played. Why is that?
It's the setup. It's more grand than a lot of the other ones, and it's just more set. It's set up well for live music because there's a pitch to there's different levels, so people don't just sit on a flat parking lot. There's views, and you can see the audience. I was able to really from stage, look out and see everybody's pods and their cars. And, some people were decking their cars out in different ways and having themes to their little areas that they were sitting in. And it's such a cool experience to stand on stage and know that all these folks, put all this effort into coming out to see live music and that it's actually paying off. And it feels, it felt official. We actually filmed a bit of a music video there as well. So, it was just a really cool site to be at,
Real quick, what was the music video? For what song?
It was the song Each Other, which was I did a crowdsourced music video with a bunch of fans. And, there's a lot of footage of fans and me and my family, playing and running around at the fairgrounds because it was just so picturesque,
Oh yeah, absolutely. You mentioned family. I know you're a relatively recent mother, and Sunday's show is going to be Mother's Day. So does that make it any more special?
It does. I was thinking about it. I think Mother's Day is something I've only just grown used to having be about me. It was always about my mom. So, it's cool to be a mom now and to see how special it really does feel to be honored and just have a day for the mamas. So, I think I'll have to come up with some mama themed tunes for the day.
So, any moms that are out there in our listening audience, what do you say to them? Give me a, hey moms, come on out for Mother's Day.
Hey mamas, if you want to feel like a real rockin' mama, come on out to my show on Sunday, Mother's Day. No better way to celebrate the mamas than to come rock out with me.
Awesome. All right. Well, you mentioned, that for until now, Mother's Day was always just about, your mom. So take me back to, the beginning where, you were born in where? It was in Vermont, right?
Yeah, I'm from Waitsfield, Vermont. Actually, technically it's based in Vermont. It's the Mad River Valley. It's a community of artists and creative types, but also ski bums. And it's a really, really wonderful community to grow up in. It's a small town. And, I got into music early on, but I was actually a terrible music student. So I learned by ear and you really developed my sense of community through song and music and singing in choirs and stuff like that.
Awesome. What you mentioned you sang in choirs and things, but what all do you remember listening to growing up? You have any favorite bands or artists?
Oh yeah. Oh, my dad and mom had the best record collection, and they kind of stopped collecting music when they had kids. So, and I was born in the 80s. So, I missed a whole decade of music, which I think was okay for me because it meant that I got to sort of develop my taste in music through my parents, era. And that was the best era for rock and roll of all. We had Led Zeppelin and The Who and Jethro Tull and the band and, Carole King and Jackson Brown and, Bob Dylan. It was an amazing record collection, and I got to dive deep into it. And my dad and mom actually let me play with the record player. So I was a vinyl junkie from early on.
Nice. So when did you start? When would you say you started pursuing it more, seriously as a career? I mean, you mentioned you were in choirs and, listening to records and stuff, but that's, a lot of people do that. What do you think was the turning point in saying, I'm going to actually go try this thing?
I performed a song that I had written, an original song called River of Time, for my entire school at a high school assembly, which was terrifying as a kid. And I remember I was wearing mud boots and a pair of Carhartt pants and kind of scuffling out on stage, and nobody knew who I was. I was a real shrinking violet, as they say. And I went out and I performed the song. And that was the day suddenly, like, people wanted to talk to me. And it was a really strange thing. I wasn't popular by any means. I was still a weirdo, but it just sort of opened the door to me realizing that, like, if I wanted positive attention, the best way to get it was through music. Cause I had pursued all the negative ways to get it. Let's just put it that way. I was not a super well-behaved teenager. So it was a better direction for me, and it just was incredibly rewarding right off the top. And from there, I continued writing my own music and performing it at, farmers markets and like arts and crafts festivals. And just, there wasn't the typical music industry, quote unquote, in Vermont. It was just a really small community of people. So I really just took any opportunity I could to get up on stage.
Absolutely. And then, of course, in 2002, you formed the rock band Grace Potter and the Nocturnals. How did that formation actually happen?
Yeah, so I went to college at St. Lawrence University for 2 years after taking a year off from school. I had made a couple of demos and one album, the ill-fated Red Shoe Rebel album, which you should not try to find, nor can you, or if you do, I don't know. You shouldn't have that record. It's a very embarrassing recording. But after that recording, I realized that I had a lot to offer, musically, and I could do it myself. So I was a solo artist, kind of cruising around selling CDs out of the back of my car. And I met Matt Burr, who was also a student at St. Lawrence, and he suggested that we start a rock band. And my first answer to him was no, because then I'd have to share the tip jar. I was barely scraping by, playing solo gigs. But he was persistent and continued to try to get me to join a band with him. And it was only when my classmate from Harvard Union High School, Corey Beard, his dad cornered me at a Christmas party when I went back home and said, my son is transferring from UMass. He doesn't have any friends, and I'm really worried about him. And he's a great bass player. So can you just make a band so that he gets comfortable and has some friends when he first gets to St. Lawrence? And so the whole beginning and formation of that band was really about trying to welcome Corey to college and have him feel comfortable. And the only rehearsal time we could get was in this place called the Java Barn at 2 a.m. So that's where the name The Nocturnals came from.
Yeah, you got to kind of be a nocturnal animal a little bit to play in a band, especially in those early days.
Always, yeah.
So, all right. So, I know you guys recorded, 4 albums as a band?
Yes.
You went solo, like from 2005 to 2012 or something, and you had a bunch of
songs. About a decade, yeah.
Yeah, about a decade. So here comes the obligatory. I have to ask about, the famous song you're probably tired of talking about. But Paris Ooh La La. Do you remember recording that? Because I feel like that's one of the ones that most people, our listeners, will recognize.
Oh, yeah. When I wrote that song, I had just gotten my Flying V guitar, and it was so exciting for me because I wanted to make a real rock record, like the Kinks, I wanted to write like, girl, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing. That was that's what I was going for. And I barely knew how to play guitar. I was really just kind of banging around on it. And these chords came out, and it was just this really rough, rugged sound. We recorded that song 7 times before it was the right version, because I was so determined for it to be a hit, and no one else thought it was going to do anything. Everybody was like, this is a stupid song. The lyrics are silly. And, it sounds like a nursery rhyme. And I was like, exactly. So what's wrong with that? And so I just kept at it, and I kept insisting that we continue recording it and chasing it down until we got the right version. And in fact, I even recorded a version of it with T-Bone Burnett that didn't work. So there was a lot of different sonic explorations with that song over the course of about 2.5 years before it ended up in its final form, which we recorded with Mark Batson on the eponymous Grace Potter and the Nocturnals album.
Awesome. All right. So, like we mentioned, you had 4, successful albums there and some hits that people recognize. What was it like venturing out on your own for that first solo album? Was it nerve-wracking? Is it, I might be leaving a good thing, but at the same time, you gotta give up one thing to be able to move on to something better, or else you'll never know.
Right.
What was that whole process like, striking out solo?
Well, it wasn't actually really, I didn't want to go solo. It's just that the band didn't like any of my new songs.
Isn't that how it always happens?
It always happens that way. So I had written all this music with the band, and me and the Nocturnals went out to Joshua Tree, as every rock band does. We went out to Joshua Tree and hung out in the desert and wrote for a month. We tried everything, and we came up with all these cool ideas and sent it to the record company, and the record company was like, nope, not gonna greenlight this album. This is a bunch of, hippie desert hooey, and we don't like it. And so you got to go back to the drawing board and write a couple hit songs, and then we'll let you know. So another few months went by, and that's when I ended up collaborating with the one and only Eric Valentine on songwriting and pre-production for what would become the album Midnight, which was supposed to be a Grace Potter and the Nocturnals record. But when I sent the newly minted demos to my band after our long, excursion in the desert, and it was just like a totally new collection of songs that were almost unrecognizable from the original stuff that we'd been coming up with, it was just crickets. The band did not even respond. It was just like, it wasn't like, cool, can't wait to get in the studio, or this is awful and we're not into it. It was just nothing. So I just continued forging ahead, thinking that we were going to be making this record together. And we did record a lot of it. I mean, the Nocturnals played on the record, and my drummer, Matt, who was also my husband at the time, was super supportive of it and was like, let's do this. This is going to be great. Even if it's weird and different, let's try it. And he and I were the founding members of the band anyway. So it felt like, there was a lot of exploration and honor and, sort of high hopes put into that record. So it was really hard to watch the band kind of dissolve over a couple of poppy songs, but it happens, and a lot of other things happened in the midst of that as well. So it was a really, really crazy time in my life, probably the craziest moment in my career, which ultimately caused me to, take pause and really step back from my career. But I have absolutely no regrets. It's still my favorite album I've ever made. So I think it was an emancipation that I needed, even if I didn't know I needed it,
So you're saying that first solo album was your favorite for all those personal and professional reasons?
Yeah, it was a wild time in my life. I mean, it was tumultuous and hard to make, but it was really freeing to be able to just dive into my Donna Summers, Cyndi Lauper, Whitney Houston, all the music that I loved so much from my childhood that wasn't in my parents' original record collection, but some of that poppier stuff, especially the Talking Heads, and I loved the band Talk Talk, and there was a lot of more punk rock, Blondie kind of vibe on the Midnight record, and for me that felt like exactly the right next step. And so creative differences are one piece of that puzzle, but I think also it was time for me to step in a new direction creatively, and I didn't feel that unnatural for me, but I think for the rest of the band, everybody had to be true to themselves, and that record to this day it represents a massive shift in my confidence in myself and my creativity.
Awesome. And how do you think that your sound, your artistry evolved between, Midnight, which was 2015, and Daylight? I always thought it's kind of cool that those titles sort of mirrored each other a little
Sure.
bit. But I mean,
Totally.
that third one got 2 Grammy nominations from. So
Yeah.
how do you think how do you think your sound sort of evolved between those two?
Well, I think I matured a lot. And so, when I go back to the album Midnight, I can hear like the burning fire of a creative soul emerging from a cocoon, because I want to be a big, beautiful, rockin' butterfly. And then with Daylight, I think there's a lot of humility and there's a lot of humanity in that record. And it's a very mature collection of music that really does kind of wrap its arms around all of my influences and all of the stories of my life and things that brought me to the place that I am. And, I'm 37 now. I'm a big grown up woman girl person. And that's a very different place than when I set out to record Midnight, in my early 30s. It was just a very different life, and I was basically a different person at the time. So I really do see those records as bookends for a massive shift and a progression in my life that I never expected to have happen, but life happens when you're busy making plans.
Exactly. There's a reason that phrase, is a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, I'm a big country fan too, and I know we got to talk about your collab with Kenny Chesney.
My man, Kenny.
Right? How did you guys, pass, cross orbits, and just memories of, you and Tequila, and what was the other one? Wild Child.
Wild Child, it's so funny. It's the 10th anniversary of the release of You and Tequila this month. And that to me is just wild, because I remember getting the cold call from Kenny. And it wasn't actually from Kenny. It was from his publicist, Holly Gleason, who was a family friend of my parents, and like a loosely affiliated friend. Barely knew her, but just, I used to paint houses in Martha's Vineyard, and she had a Martha's Vineyard connection. And so by way of some families who had hired me to paint their houses, Holly somehow got my phone number and said, well, Kenny was floating around in St. John, and I had stuck your CD into a pile of like a shuffle on his CD player on his boat in St. John. And he didn't know it. So she just kind of snuck it in to his boat. And he was listening to, a CD changer on shuffle, and my song Apologies came on. And apparently he just laid there, as he tells it, he just laid there looking up at the stars one night on his boat, floating around, and said, that's the voice I want for this song, You and Tequila, and called Holly and said, I don't know who stuck this CD in my CD player, but I want her. I want that voice. I'm going to go get her. So, that was the auspicious moment where I accidentally became a country singer.
Man, very clever to sneak that song onto his boat. That's great.
No, thank you, Holly. She's full of all the best ideas.
Holly and Kenny Chesney, now forever, intertwined with your career. So cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned Apologies. Didn't you perform that on One Tree Hill one time too?
I did, yes. One Tree Hill was a big, Mark Schwann, the music supervisor of One Tree Hill, was a big fan of mine. I actually made a guest appearance on the show as an actor, playing myself, but like a street musician version of myself, which is ridiculous. Not super proud of that performance, but I did get to score the show that week. And so I got to reimagine the theme song, and I got to score all the dialogue, put the music behind the entire episode, which was so fun. That's kind of always been my dream gig, is to score for film and TV. So, it was a really big moment. And I think all of those TV moments when my songs find their way into shows like One Tree Hill or Grey's Anatomy or, American Idol and The Voice have used my songs a lot. It's a really big testament to the fact that music is part of a storytelling process and a really powerful way to connect emotional moments in our lives with a musical memory that gets imprinted in your mind. And, I know a lot of people who say, like, I'll never forget where I was when I heard, X, Y, Z song playing. And I've since had so many more opportunities to do things like that. I do the theme music for the show Frankie and Grace, which I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but it's awesome. Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin just being amazing, hilarious people.
Isn't it Grace and Frankie? I think it's flipped.
Oh, Grace and Frankie. See, yeah, I get it all mixed up.
It's a cover. Isn't it a Steelers wheel cover?
It is, yeah, Stuck in the Middle with You. And then, I had 10 years with Disney, so I had opportunities to write music and perform music on a bunch of films, which was really, really fun for me because it's, I think as a little girl, I definitely grew up thinking I was going to be, a cartoon voice in a Disney movie. So that actually came true.
Yeah, remind us how that came true. I mean, my little niece Holly is obsessed with Tangled, and your song is something that I want on the end credits. How'd that come about?
That's right. Well, actually, it's a really funny story. That song was supposed to be in a different movie, which was the film with Isla Fisher called Confessions of a Shopaholic. And it didn't get used in the movie. It didn't end up getting placed in the movie in the spot that they had wanted it. So it just sort of sat in the Disney Music archive. And the Disney Music Group has, a large artillery of songwriters and songs that are ready and available at any time. And I think they were digging around when they were making the Rapunzel film, and they were sort of writing out the script for it and fell upon this forgotten song, I Want Something That I Want, for the Confessions of a Shopaholic movie, and ended up really feeling like that was something they wanted to pursue. They just needed me to change some lyrics around. So they sent me the script and I listened to it, and it was immediately obvious, like, this song is so right for this movie. It just needs lyrics that tell the story of Rapunzel. And it was so fun. It was one of my favorite collaborations ever. A really, really wonderful project.
Awesome. Well, one more on the whole animated and TV scoring, movie scoring dream job that you mentioned. Didn't you also join the Flaming Lips for Tim Burton?
Yes, yeah. I've worked with Tim on a couple of films. He did, Tim Burton did all the Alice in Wonderland series, and so there was a collaboration there with the amazing Jefferson Airplane song White Rabbit, and Tim and his team really enjoyed that process, and I get to meet Danny Elfman and sort of get a little, again, the vision into that world of scoring film and TV, which was just such a dream for me. And so when Tim Burton put together the Frankenweenie film, it was just so spectacularly bizarre with all the stop motion animation with the dog. And it was a huge project for Disney and for Tim's team. So it took a long time. So they had a lot of time to prepare and get the music in there. And when I saw the film, it wasn't quite finished yet, but it just clearly was like, this is as weird as anything. Who are the weirdest people I know? The Flaming Lips. I'm going to call Wayne. So Wayne and I had already had a couple of fun collaborations and adventures and misadventures together before that. So it felt like the right moment to tap into that collaboration. It was one of my weirdest memories ever, flying to his house in Oklahoma City and going to his studio and recording that. But it was wonderful.
That's so cool. And that you got to meet Danny Elfman. Man, what a genius, man. Edward Scissorhands, his Batman theme. I mean, just everything. Unbelievable.
It's a really cool team that Tim has, and Danny is such a signature piece of that sound. So I was honored to be included.
So cool. Well, you've been generous with your time. We'll wrap this way. I know, you've pretty much played like every major music festival around. I think I've seen you on bills at Coachella, Lollapalooza, Bonnaroo, everywhere.
Yep.
But talk about how rewarding it was to start your own up in Vermont. I guess, what's it called? Grand Point North.
Grand Point North, yeah. My festival it's a huge piece of my heart because, everybody always asks you when you start out, especially in music, but if you're in music at all, there's that fun question that everybody asks everybody, which is, if you could throw a music festival anywhere with anybody, who would it be? So you get this kind of blank slate what would you do? What would your dream lineup be? And that's where the conversation started. And this was almost 15 years ago when I started having it with my dear friend and collaborator, Alex Crothers, at Higher Ground. And we had been walking the site at the waterfront in Burlington, Vermont, which is a beautiful marina with a gorgeous view of the Adirondack Mountains and a big, gorgeous lake, in front of us. And it just always seemed like an amazing site for a festival. And so we started guinea pigging that site, kind of like what we're doing with these drive-in shows, actually, where we didn't know if it would work. We didn't know what size stage would fit. We didn't know if there'd be enough infrastructure for the parking and, where do the bathrooms go, where, all those little things that you have to think about. And it turned into, one of the most successful moments in all of Vermont music history. It created something that was never there before, which was an opportunity to bring in, fans and bands from out of the state of Vermont and share a slice of my home state and the culture that is so special and so singular to Vermont with the world. And, we've had so many countless incredible acts play. This was supposed to be our 10th anniversary in 2020. It would have been our 10th anniversary, which has been postponed. But, countless incredible bands. And, I can't even list them all off, but we've had a plethora of joyful moments to celebrate. And it's always been sort of musician based, the experience of the musicians and sharing what I feel is the best of Vermont with people from out of state, while also respecting and loving the community that I came from. It's just so near and dear to my heart. I can't wait to get it going again and finally celebrate a decade of Grand Point North.
Awesome. Well, I'll encourage all our listeners to check out Grand Point North Festival when it's back, when life returns a little more normal here. But in the meantime, don't miss this weekend at the Frederick Fairgrounds. Grace Potter will be here in Frederick, Maryland. Everyone come check it out, and especially from Mother's Day too. Whether you're a mom or not, it'll be a great show. Any final words you want to say on come on out?
Yeah, I was just going to say, dads out there, if you want to look super cool for your moms and surprise them, because flowers are boring. And flowers are also totally not available because apparently the flower growing season has been shortened due to COVID. Don't get your wife or girlfriend or mother of whoever your baby daddy child is flowers. Get him a ticket to go see a rock concert. It is an incredible way to surprise. It's better than chocolates. It's better than flowers. And I promise I won't disappoint.
Yeah, you can obviously you can sit in your car, but most people I've seen are sitting, that you basically, it's like they put their chairs outside and it's almost like, your own personal tailgate right by the stage. So
it really is. I have to say, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with concerts after this, because it's almost like everybody gets their own VIP section. And with the way that the Frederick show is set up, it really is, everybody gets a good view. There's no version of it where anybody is not able to see the stage. And I think that's something that makes it extra special and intimate, even though it's got plenty of room for everybody. So, I'm super excited to get back there. It was definitely one of my favorite venues. And I'm so glad to have been able to talk to you about it today. This has been the most in-depth radio interview I've done in a long time. So, we could have written a book on this thing by now. Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you.
No, thanks for making so much time. We really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.